Hey, welcome to this edition of Snowmobiler Television. On this week's show, we're really hauling, but not down the trails. And that's because we've got a story on hauling 3 different levels of loads with 3 different classes of pickup trucks. Plus, we're gonna go for a rip in Ford's new F-250 Tremor with the 7.3-liter gas engine. And I've got some tips on making your next trailering experience maybe go just a little bit smoother. But first, we're gonna start with a story from Huntsville, Ontario, where we're going for a ride with some kid sleds on some small Yamahas.
STV is brought to you by Yamaha, revs your heart. Polaris Snowmobiles, together we are born for more. Ford F-Series, Canada's best-selling line of trucks for 53 years. Tough, smart, capable.
Okay, welcome to Yamaha Riding Adventures. I have this waiver for you to fill out. There's another one underneath it too as well.
Okay.
And if you have trouble with that, let me know. Yes, at the bottom here you'll see parent, signature, and participant. We have a mini program or a fun ride for kids starting at 6 years old. This machine here is an SRX 120. And it's really targeted for that 6, 7, 8-year-old, sometimes 9 if that child is in a small for that age. And then we have another unit called the Snow Scoot, which really fits for a large 8-year-old and even up to a 14-year-old as long as they're small. So that's for kids. It's a half hour and they learn how to ride and it's a lot of fun for them. We have kids coming back time and time again. If we have a guest that's staying at Deerhurst or someone wants to come and try this program, the parents need to call, make an appointment or a booking in advance. That way we can make sure that we can get that done. If they just want to come and walk in, it's kind of by chance that we may be able to fit them in. It's a very popular program, but if they call our phone line, make a booking and make it happen.
Take the dare. This is the time we make it ours. This is the place we got our scars. But it's never enough when the going is tough. It can lead to the hidden love. That's why we never give up. Never give up.
We have a lot of kids that come and it's their very first time on anything motorized. Absolutely, quite a few. So some of them are a little intimidated by the noise and the vibration. We have certain steps for younger ones that we use a stand so we can let them sit on the machine without any noise first. And it's like baby steps, building blocks if I may, and it start off real simple and work up more difficult as you go. So with the stand on the back, we start the engine, but it's not going anywhere. So they can rev the machine up, they can feel the vibration, hear the noise, and they can put that together with the movement of the throttle and get used to that. And then once they've got that down, of throttle on, throttle off, and brakes, then we release the sled stand and then let them start to move. And then we start, stop, start, stop. We want to make sure they can stop safely before we let them go. And then we let them ride around a little track, start, stop, and then myself or one of our guides leads them around a golf course, which is private property, and it's just for us for that purpose. And there's a lot of hills, rolling hills that the kids can ride over. It's really a lot of fun. We have several kids that come back time and time again. Their parents that come are often concerned about safety, especially the mums. But once I explain to them that this machine, for example, has a top speed of 10 kilometers an hour and it's factory set, and if you can run fast, you can catch them. And they really like to hear that part, especially when you're dealing with a 6 or 7-year-old, they're really worried about it. But once they're settled down with their nerves and see that things are going okay, they're pretty excited. I mean, everybody, both mums and dads, have their cameras out, they're watching what's going on, and they're really excited for the kids to see them doing something like this and being successful at it in a safe environment. But once we get the kids out following our guide, we find that they can fixate on the guide and they look at the guide and they just do what the guide does. Our guides are all trained to over-exaggerate when they make a corner, to lean extra, so that the kids can see that and then they tried to copy that. And they stay in those same tracks and they're successful. Most of our kids, it's the very first time and they're so excited, and to be honest, it's the best part at the end, seeing their smile and how much fun. They'll come up and give you a hug and then they'll hug you again before they leave. I mean, the connections, the memories that we create here, just incredible.
That's why we never give up. Never give up.
I've been hauling trailers behind vehicles since I was a little kid, and one thing I've learned is that you really don't want the tail wagging the dog. But to prevent that, it's critical you match the size of tow rig with the size of trailer and load you anticipate hauling. For us sledders, almost all of us require a trailer at some point to move our machines around. Now, some of our setups are huge, elaborate tow rigs, while others are simple two-place open trailers, along with everything in between. To help tell the story, we've assembled 3 trucks capable of hauling 3 different size loads. Now, these rigs are pretty typical of what's out there across all truck manufacturers, and the information we're talking about here is relevant no matter which brand you're loyal to. Starting with the smallest of our 3 trucks, we have the new Ford Ranger. This class of pickup usually falls in the 5,000 to 7,000 pound range for towing and is the perfect platform for smaller single axle trailers like our open deck with 2 sleds. Now, this class is also more than adequate for enclosed clamshell versions of this trailer, along with smaller enclosed cargo styles as well. The next model up is the half-ton class and our Ecoboost equipped F-150. Now, this class of truck is typically capable of hauling 12,000 to 13,000 pounds depending on how they're equipped from the factory, but I feel they work best with a little more modest trailer of around 7,000 pounds like our enclosed Legend. With the weather we potentially face traveling to wintertime destinations that are usually quite far from home, I don't think it's wise to max out any tow rating on any vehicle. Speaking of tow ratings, the big boy in this group is the new Ford F-250 Tremor package. Trucks in this 3/4 ton category can haul 15,000 pounds and beyond properly equipped. Now, we're nowhere near the limit with our Legend, but adding a truck deck changes the game. This combination would be much closer to the limit if the deck was on a half-ton. Although this class might be technically capable of carrying the load, the softer suspensions and high center of gravity the deck creates makes the driving experience a puckerfest. On a long-distance trip, if you're really hanging onto your rig, it can become super fatiguing. Even on the Tremor, you can feel the weight move the truck around, which is only complicated with the addition of a relatively light trailer for this class of truck. So why is this information important? Well, if you're in the market for a new tow vehicle, simply going by the manufacturer's specs may not get what works best for you. Knowing what you plan on towing or hauling is critical for choosing a tow rig, along with where that weight is placed, like way up high on a truck deck. You should also consider how often and how far you'll be towing a trailer. If towing is only a once-in-a-while thing for you, my experience suggests you can plan on pushing closer to your vehicle's maximum ratings. However, if you're the type to tow trailers a lot and for long distances, overspeccing your vehicle will make for a much more enjoyable driving experience. Being prepared with this knowledge will put you in a better position when you go to a dealership to begin the process of purchasing a new truck.
So from half ton to 3/4 ton, a lot of people don't know this, but the actual cab is the same. So the cab from the F-250 350 is the identical cab from the F-150. The biggest thing is the frame. The frame's a lot beefier. The frames can take a lot more torsional rigidity, a lot more cross members. And what that does is it can take a lot more weight and can take a lot more payload. The biggest thing as well is the amount of springs in the rear. An F-150 is going to tend to have anywhere between 2 to 3 springs, and when you move up 250, 350, depending on what package and what GVWR package you get, you can have anywhere from 3 to 5 springs in the back as well. Actually, a great example is with sled decks. An F-150 and an F-250, the biggest difference will be payload. So if you put a sled deck and have a truck fully loaded, you'll notice that the truck does squat quite a bit, anywhere between 3 to 4 inches. And what that is because just the payload on top of the truck, and it's a very high center of gravity when you go with a sled deck, you'll notice that it does squat quite a bit. F-250 with its more payload, you're going to notice that it barely squats. Why that is it's meant to take that weight, and it'll actually drive better once those springs and shocks are compressed as well. With Ford and other manufacturers, in the 3/4 ton, you're always going to have a gas and you're always going to have a diesel. Every manufacturer has its own philosophy on it. Ford has had our 6.2 liter for about 10 years now. What they've done is they've created this new 7.3 gas motor. It's called the codename Godzilla. It's actually the biggest production cubic inch motor on the market right now. From there, you are going to move up to the diesel. The diesel, all new for this year. They've changed the mapping of the computer, and actually now best in class 1,050 foot-pounds of torque. Everyone's going to be hovering between that 900 to 1,000 foot-pounds of torque. Everyone does a great job. It's basically who's the big king this year.
I'm sure you've also noticed that all 3 of these rigs don't really look like stockers. Now the Tremor is a special model right off the assembly line, but the Ranger and F-150 have both been modified at the dealer.
Big thing about the aftermarket world is it's a $4 billion a year industry, and a lot of it is basically personalizing. So everyone knows the Mustang, everyone knows snowmobiles, everyone wants to personalize, and that's why we have these funky colors on these snowmobiles. That's why the accessory catalog for snowmobiles is so great. Well, trucks should be the exact same. Everyone wants to personalize a truck on how they want it to look. In terms of if I can go and have my tires, my lift kit, my exhaust, all these accessories put into my payment and make my life easier and get the dealership to do it and know that, hey, I have professional technicians that are doing this, I personally feel better, and I think the customer feels better about it as well. Yeah, so you definitely want to put quality parts. And what I mean by quality parts is when we build a truck, we're trying to keep it as close to factory spec as possible. And with aftermarket companies these days, the tire manufacturers, the wheel manufacturers, most of the time it's actually much greater than the factory spec. So if you have a tire that's supposed to take a load of 700 kilos, a lot of these tires nowadays start at 700 kilos when you go aftermarket. Be very careful with tires, because tires are the most important part of the truck as well.
These factory custom trucks or dealer mods are becoming more popular all the time. Affordable too when all rolled into one payment, but you should also know that these mods can have an effect on the truck's capabilities. Any modification made, whether done at the dealer or at home, should be well thought out with an understanding of the consequences. And speaking of consequences, we were called out by Greg at One More Lap here at Calabogie Motorsport Park to race a sled against their all-wheel drive Lamborghini. I think he's about to feel the consequences of his challenge. Coming up after the break, I'm going to go for a rip in the Tremor. I think I'm going to start with donuts. When we asked Ford if they would provide us trucks to do a trailering story with, they said no problem, but we're wondering if a Ford F-250 Tremor with the 7.3 liter gas engine would be okay. I thought to myself, that'll do. What makes a Tremor is pretty obvious. This thing sits up higher than a normal F-250 with a factory installed 2-inch suspension lift up front and a larger off-road wheel and tire package. This model also results in better approach and departure angles than regular Super Duties, along with deeper water fording abilities if you require that. From up here in the driver's seat, you definitely get the feeling that you're up in the air. A commanding view would be the way I'd describe it. There's also selectable driving modes that include a new rock crawl mode, and the Tremors get an off-road cruise control system called Trail Control. Also in keeping with a more capable off-road theme are running boards that tuck up nice and close to the body. The other news is the new engine under the hood. Now, there's no replacement for displacement, and this mill has 7.3 liters of it. That makes 430 horsepower and 475 foot-pounds of torque to move the truck and your trailer down the road. And let me tell you, it sure feels good. This new engine has been optimized for towing with a tailored power curve that takes into account the best possible fuel efficiency while loaded down. It's also mated to a 10-speed automatic to make sure you stay in the meat of the power. Cruising either loaded or empty is almost effortless for the big gasser, although not as good as the diesel would be, which is also available in the Tremor but at a considerable cost. If you were towing all the time, I would think long and hard about going diesel, but for everyday use and the occasional tow job, I think the gas engine is the more logical choice. It sounds good too from inside the cab. When you put your foot down, the transmission downshifts 4 gears and the big V8 pulls to a 6,000 RPM redline. How great would it be if these big cube trucks start a horsepower war between the manufacturers, just like the one that's going on right now with the small displacement turbo trucks? Now, that would just be good for all of us, and maybe this first shot from Ford might be the one that starts it all. We've been talking a lot about trucks and trailers so far, but I wanted to take some time and give you some tips on trailering, so hopefully your next experience goes a little bit better. And the first tip I have for you is backing up. If you're a novice reverser, sometimes just trying to figure out which way to start steering is the hardest part about backing up. So here's the tip. Hold your hand at the bottom of the steering wheel, and whichever direction you want your trailer to go, push your hand in that direction. This will start your backing up with the correct steering input. Eventually, you're gonna have to follow the trailer around with the truck though. Now, if you do have a Ford vehicle, you can get the trailer backup assist program, and once you have your trailer programmed into the system, the truck will back it up for you. The next tip is a little bit more about common sense, and that's to make sure your safety chains never touch the asphalt. And to prove my point on this, I hung this chain as a test underneath the trailer. Now, there was enough clearance there static, but as the truck was traveling down the road and the suspension action was moving, this chain was constantly touching the asphalt, and you can see that the links are literally worn away. Now, not only does this compromise the strength of the chain, but if you get stopped by the fuzz and they see this, your day's not going to end well. The next tip is all about these big trailers, and that's the fact that you want to get them as level as possible. This is for a couple of reasons. Number one, you want them level to get the most amount of ground clearance both ahead of and behind the axles, so if you have to go through some sort of an obstacle, you're not going to bottom out. Next, you want them level, especially with axle systems that incorporate torsion-style axles. These ones, if the trailer is either heading uphill or downhill, can either load the front axle or the rear axle, and this unequal loading can really have an effect on how that trailer handles behind your pickup truck. Now, trailers respond well to tongue weight, and if you don't have enough of it, things can get a little bit weird, kind of like the tail wagging the dog, and you want to avoid that. Now, if you find this situation, it's a good idea to pull over and just rearrange your load a little bit, move it forward to get that tongue weight back. If you do, your fatigue level and the amount that you got to fight that rig going down the road will be way less. The next tip is about these LED lights, which are on a lot of modern trailers. Now, they're great, they're super bright, and they react really fast when you turn them on, but unlike these incandescent lights, they don't generate their own heat. So when we're traveling down the road and there's lots of snow dust, which tends to pack on the backside of these big trailers, it covers the lights really quickly and you can't see them. So that's why it's a good idea anytime you stop for food or gas, throw an eyeball on these things and clean them off if they're covered with snow. The next tip I have is all about attitude and being smooth. Now, on the racetrack, smooth is fast. Trailering, Smooth isn't necessarily fast, but it is definitely safer. Acceleration, steering, and braking should all be done as smooth as possible. Get too aggressive with any of these movements and you run the risk of breaking traction. You don't want to do that. Next is attitude and patience. Anytime you're traveling with a trailer in the wintertime, it's a good thing to have as much patience as possible, because let's face it, we all want to get to the trails.
STV has been brought to you by Ultimix Belts. Performance driven, performance proven. CKX, wear your passion. On Snow Magazine, for snowmobilers from snowmobilers.
Hey, welcome to this week's YouTube comment of the day. And this is actually a thread of comments that come from way back in 2018 with our episode number 12. And it starts with MLG Industries launching the first volley. And they say, I thought this show was about snowmobiles. And then we've got Mark Bow lobbing it back into the court saying it's all about whoever pays the most cash. But then we've got Sarcasm coming in at the end, and he says, so, how do you get your sled to the trail? I've got more invested in the rig I tow with than I do the sleds, so I appreciate the relevant info. Sarcasm, I appreciate you. Thanks for the comment. To all, love reading them, so keep them coming.